Hello again, everyone. This is Stan Scott with Foggy Bottom Line Media.
And this is Scott Konopasek.
And today we're recording the 12th episode of the Foggy Bottom Line podcast. Today's Wednesday, October 29th, as we sit and record. And with the election only a few days away, November 4th, next Tuesday, so less than a week, Virginians will close out the voting. They've already been voting for some weeks now. But election day will be your last chance. So if you haven't voted, try to early vote before then, or make sure you get to the polls on election day, on Tuesday, election day. And today, Scott and I were chatting, and I think it would help a lot of you out there if we could help you with a better understanding of sort of what goes on behind the scenes in these elections. You know, what are the election workers doing? How are the votes counted, or so, and how are they reported out? What does that sort of look like? And fortunately for us, my co-host is Scott. Has been an election official for decades. What, 30 years or something, Scott?
Yeah, 30 plus, yeah.
30 plus years. So he's done this before in other states. And he was also the elections guy in Fairfax County for a while. So he's familiar with how we do these things in Virginia. So we thought we'd just talk a little bit about what that looks like behind the scenes. You know, the candidates will all be at watch parties Wednesday night, but the folks who do the job that Scott used to have will not be. They'll be up late making sure that everything is reported and accurate and gets to the news organizations and the state elections commission on time. So, Scott, you want to outline for us real quick generally what that looks like, and then we can dig into some of the details.
Sure. Well, Stan, you said it was October 29th. When I have my election official hat on, it means that it's E-6, so 6 days prior to the election. And that's election speak. All the election folks know what's supposed to happen at whatever E- date that they're at. And right now, as we're at E-6, as you pointed out, we have early voting going on. We have vote by mail ballots being returned to the elections offices. And the staff behind the scenes is verifying all those ballots that are being returned. And they have started to actually open those ballots and scan them into the machine. They're not going to run any reports or generate any results, but that pre-processing of those vote by mails has started, and that allows election officials on election night to report out all the early votes that they have. There's way too many nowadays for that process to start on election day like it historically did. Other things going on at E-6 is supplies are being delivered out to the polling places. All the voting machines, all the signage, all the tables, all the electronic poll pads for looking up voters. All those things are being delivered or have just been delivered. And then there is always the last minute replacement of election officers who drop out for one reason or another. So it's kind of like the day or two before the wedding, when everybody's scrambling to get all the pieces put together. You're throwing a big party for the whole county.
Right.
You're throwing a party for your whole jurisdiction, and you're hoping everybody comes. So you have to be ready, and this is the final stages. People are already tired. They've been working 7 days a week for probably a month or two now, and 10 to 12-hour days, all those 7 days. So people are starting to get frazzled, starting to get tired, looking forward to the end. And it's very different as an election administrator than the experience I'm having right now as a candidate. This is kind of the home stretch for candidates, and I'm a rookie candidate. Remember, this is my first time. You may have better insights, but at this point in time, if you haven't already done it, it's probably not going to get done. So it's a little bit like election officials, I guess. It's just making sure that the last things that have been planned out are actually coming together, because you really can't do much that's new or anything this close to the election. What's been your experience, Stan? You're an experienced campaigner.
Well, I think from the candidate side, you're right. At this point, really, it's about trying to motivate all of those people who haven't been paying attention until now, because a lot of people simply don't pay attention to elections until that last weekend. You're right. There's some things that if you haven't done it already, if you were going to send out a mail piece and it's not in the mail yet, it's too late, right? Because they need to hit mailboxes on the Saturday before Election Day. And a lot of that has kind of been pushed back because of early voting. Remember, a good percentage of folks have already voted. So at this point, the best thing that a candidate can do, I think, is ramp up whatever digital advertising or conventional, TV advertising they've been doing if they have the money. But more important than that is just to get out and get in front of people. I know a really good example of this is the bus tours that the candidates are doing. Spamberger is trying to hit as many places as she possibly can this last week. I think she's going to be here in Ashland on Friday morning, and we'll both be there. So you might get a spot report from that. And notably, this is something that McAuliffe didn't do 4 years ago. McAuliffe didn't come here. He did not stand next to local candidates and say, hey, vote for these guys too, and bring out their supporters, which I think really cost him. I think Virginia Democrats need to understand they cannot count on Northern Virginia to carry the thing. But to circle back to the election side, because I think it's important for people to understand more about how this works, especially if you're into this and you're watching the returns on TV or you're constantly refreshing VPAP or the VEC website, trying to see who's winning, what's going on. Because I think it's important to understand how these things get reported. I study this, so I know a lot about it, but Scott, you have a unique perspective. And it kind of makes me think of a military operation in a way, because I think everyone should understand the logistics involved here. There's a lot of stuff that has to be moved around. Those stacks of ballots that no one's filled out yet have to be printed and delivered. They have to be checked to make sure they're accurate. And this is what we mean when we say if it hasn't been done yet, it might be starting to get too late to do it. And folks that do this kind of stuff, just like if you're preparing to go to the battlefield, you have to make sure you got the fuel, you got the water, you got the food, you got the bullets. Everyone's in the right place to start out, and everyone knows what the plan is. So we talk about E-6 and E-5, the last 4 or 5 days before. I think you guys were working on the last weekend, right? I would be surprised if you weren't.
Right, absolutely. That's really a busy day, updating all the voter lists to make sure that they're ready on Tuesday morning. Yeah. So on Monday, let's kind of jump ahead to E-1 for a minute.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Let's jump ahead to the Monday and Tuesday and what happens on those couple days.
Yeah. So on Monday, during the day or in the evening, the election officers are going to show up to their respective polling places, and they're going to unpack and start to set up their polling place the night before, the day before, so that when they come in at 5 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, everything's already set up and ready to go. And so Monday night is an important time for the election staff to be prepared to troubleshoot any issues that come up, or any supplies that the workers can't find or they say are missing that they need to have in hand before voting starts in the morning. So that's that last minute drill to make sure everything's covered and everybody's ready. And then everybody's pretty familiar with election day. Voting starts first thing in the morning, and it runs until 7 o'clock here in Virginia. During the day back in the office, other than answering voter questions on the phones and working through issues with election officers, there's not a whole lot going on. In most cases, the vote by mail ballots, absentee ballots, should have been already counted or largely counted. There might be some scanning that is going on of those ballots during the day. But things really get crazy starting at 7 o'clock once the polls close. So when the polls close at 7, all the election officers at all the locations go through their closeout procedures, and they fill out the reports. They gather up all the ballots. They produce reports off of their machines that have been scanning ballots all day, and they call in those election results. So while that's going on and the election results are being called into the central office, at the office, all those machines that were used to count the ballots during early voting, they're going through that same closed down report generation process.
That makes sense.
Because remember, you can't produce reports of election results before the polls close on election day. So those machines have been out recording votes for 45 days, but they haven't been closed out and gone into the report generation, the results generation mode. So the first time that can happen is after 7 o'clock on election night. So the absentee votes, which should have already been scanned largely, are often the first results that can be reported. Now, over the years here in Virginia, those were always reported last. Although the volume of ballots over the last 4 years has caused a lot of jurisdictions to try to get those results out first thing. So shortly after 7 o'clock, if a jurisdiction releases some reports, it's usually the vote by mail reports. And then the precinct reports, as the results are called in, they're reported out as well as they come in. And then towards the end, after the early voting machines have generated their reports, those numbers are added to the mix. Now, what's important to keep in mind about the early vote numbers is it's a huge number, because people have been voting for 45 days. Here in the district right now, just in the 59th district, between the 3 counties, there are almost 20,000 people who have voted early. So the numbers that get dropped in all at once is a really huge number compared to the drib and drab of the individual precinct results as they come in. So that timeline and the sequence is really important to understand if you're trying to anticipate what the final numbers are going to be.
Right. And what would you say? First of all, quick question: are there any precincts or precincts in Virginia, maybe very small rural ones, that still hand count anything?
I'm not aware of anybody hand counting anything.
Okay.
I think the laws, when we went to the paper ballot, required machines to count those ballots. There might be some hand counting that happens during the canvassing process, during the auditing process, to validate the results, or anything that wasn't able to be scanned on election day might be hand counted and reported. But that's kind of the sequence of what's reported.
Okay.
On election night, after they call in the numbers, after they read off the tape and call in the numbers, all the ballots are physically gathered up and sealed in containers with tamper indicating seals. And all the results that were reported have been recorded during the day on some type of electronic medium, usually a thumb drive. That's the backup to the paper ballots. So the thumb drives are removed. So after the results have been called in, the physical ballots themselves and the thumb drives are returned to the election office on election night.
Okay.
And in most cases, they're not touched again unless there's some reason to do so because the tapes have already been called in. Now, one of the things that's unique from my experience with Virginia is that the results are hand typed in to a statewide system, and that's how they're reported to the state.
Okay.
So there's not an electronic transfer
Okay.
of all the results. They're manually keyed in off of paper reports into the state system. So that takes a lot of time
Right.
to
Right.
do.
Sure.
And whenever you have a human being and a keyboard involved,
Yeah.
you're going to have some errors. So you have to spend a lot of time proofing before you send those numbers up. So
Right, sure.
all the localities in Virginia are typing in the results and sending them up to the state, all at the same time. So there's 131 localities, I believe is the number. And all those results go into a queue at the state, and the state reviews them all before they add them into the vote totals.
Right.
So there's a manual process going on at the back end as well. And there's no telling what the criteria is that they're using to decide which localities results are going to look at first. Sometimes they say, well, let's just get the little ones out of the way, and then we'll do the big ones later. Sometimes they say, no, let's do the big ones first, and then the little ones. So there's some kind of decision-making process going on at the state as to when certain localities' results are reported. So there's not really a connection between how fast the jurisdiction works at reporting the results and when they actually get published up on the state's website.
Right. Okay.
So
because the state has to process all that too and make sure it fits what they expect, and there's probably some procedures for making sure that they match. And a simple one would certainly be, there's 100 registered voters in precinct 20, but if someone types in 120 votes, they know that's wrong, right?
Right.
So they can circle back and say, hey, wait a minute, is this a mistype or is there something wrong with the machine? And I think trust in these elections is a big deal. And Scott, seriously, thanks for all your service in trying to keep these things on the up and up and valid and done correctly so that we can trust them. And I know people have a lot of election integrity questions, and I guess the first one would be, and I think I know the answer, but you can confirm, these machines, when they're sitting in the high school gym, waiting for people to stick the ballot into the machine, it's not connected to the internet, right?
No, voting machines are never ever connected to the internet.
Okay.
They are programmed using that removable medium, usually, like I said, a thumb drive. And
right. So
I mentioned at the beginning that the equipment is being delivered to the locations right now. So that machine, that scanner, is sitting in that high school gym right now across the state. And what keeps them secure? There are multiple levels of locks and seals and tamper indicating devices that are applied to the machine to deter tampering, to detect tampering. And there's a set of procedures for opening the polls before any ballots are put in to verify that nothing has been tampered with on that machine. So it's a very extensive and multi-level set of checks and balances to make sure that the machines are ready, they haven't been tampered with, and that they're secure. So voters don't need to worry about the machine sleeping over at the high school for a couple of days, that somebody might get in there and tamper with them. because if they
Right.
did, it would be detectable.
Right.
And there's a whole set of
Uh,
processes for how to replace that any machine that may be tampered with.
sure. Sure. And so the election official, when they get there Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. or so, they look to make sure none of these things have been touched or manipulated or anything like that. Make sure they're all still the way they were set up before they were delivered. And then, as a practical matter, when I go there and vote, and I put the ballot in the machine, it's basically grading. I mean, it's basically doing the same thing um, a machine would do if it's grading a multiple choice test, like you
Yeah,
used
so
to
like
take in
it's the
schools, right?
Scantron that we used to in college and high
Like
school, fill in the
right,
bubble and
but
put it in the machine. Yeah,
it's
that's
exactly
the
like the old
process that it goes through.
Scantron. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, and these things, they're it's important to remember when you vote, make sure that you're careful about filling in that bubble because if the machine can make a mistake, it'll miss it if you don't fill the bubble in completely, or it might double count if you go outside the bubble. Now, I know the modern ones are much better at this than the ones that we used when we were in school. That was a long
yeah.
time
So
ago.
you bring up a good point, and it's important for voters to know that if they were to make one of those types of errors, like not completely fill in the bubble or vote for more than one in, uh, incorrectly, the machine when they scan it will stop, kick the ballot out, and tell the voter that there's an issue, and say, "Would
Mm,
you like to fix that issue?"
right,
So the voter has a choice of taking that ballot, getting a clean ballot, spoiling the old ballot and getting a clean ballot, and fixing their error and redoing it, or they can say, "No, that's exactly what I want," and they override the error detection on the machine and say, "Take this ballot anyway." Uh,
okay.
so the machines are a lot smarter than the Scantrons from a long
Right.
time ago.
Yeah.
It's
From
digital.
the 70s.
Yeah, it's imaging technology right now rather than just looking for a shadow on a form.
Right.
And so
It,
it gives the possibility of informing voters if there's an issue or an error with their ballot. And almost
right.
every jurisdiction has a person assigned to be at the machine to
Hmm.
answer any questions or solve any problems that a voter may encounter when they're putting in
That's
their ballot.
that's my experience as well. And one more quick thing before we touch on election integrity a little more, because I have another couple of points to make on that. And that is, if you're disabled and you aren't voting by mail, you can vote curbside. You just drive over or have someone drive you over to the election to the polls, park in one of the designated spots, and then ask one of the volunteers for. I mean, there's going to be volunteers at most places for both parties. Ask a volunteer or an election official. Uh, just tell them you want to vote curbside, and they'll send someone out with a ballot,
Yeah.
verify
Usually
your
they've
identity.
posted a phone number
Yeah, yeah, right.
on that designated spot to call, and that works great for voters who have some mobility issues.
Hmm.
They can't get out of the car, but there are other voters who have different kinds of issues that need some kind of accommodation. Visual is one of them,
Right,
and language is another, and literacy might be another. So there is a designated accessible voting machine in every precinct required by federal and state law that will assist the voter, will allow them to vote their ballot privately uh, with whatever accommodation they need to actually mark it. So there's an electronic interface between the voter and the paper ballot that gets produced that
right.
that people with most people with some type of disability can negotiate that privately. There's even puff and sip technology that a voter brings their puff and sip device in because they don't may not have motor skills, and they can use that to navigate and vote their ballot. There's audio uh, uh, headphones. There's a recording of the ballot, so a voter who's visually impaired can navigate the ballot and then with a little controller, mark their responses and have it read back to them before it's formalized. So there's a lot of time and effort put into making voting accessible to the greatest number of people with the widest range of accommodations that may be needed.
No, and yeah. So folks, don't let that stop you. If you're concerned that it's going to be difficult, uh, don't be worried, because the state has and the localities are making sure that everyone who wants to vote can do it, whatever disability or accommodation you need. But just to circle back, so it's election day or election night. It's 7 o'clock. Your folks are around the state, are compiling. They're basically making the reports from the machines, doing the same thing in the office for the early voting machines, right? Which it's the same
Right.
machine, same type of machine, does the same thing. Um, and then they start reporting to the state by typing it into a portal, right, that the
Right.
state has set up. And then the folks at the state level sort of triage all these reports. They take them all in, they verify them using some sort of processes. They confirm that they make logical sense, but also that they seem to be accurate, that they are accurate.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about auditing this stuff here in just a minute. But one of the things I want to make sure folks understand is that if you're watching these returns on TV, or you're following them on VPAP or on the Elections Commission website, one of the things that raised some alarms in 2016 was that it looked an awful lot like Trump was winning the entire night, right? And then this big dump of votes came later, and that made it look like something fishy might have happened. But what's really going on here is that the either it's a type of vote that's reported late, like absentee ballots or mail-in or early voting, which in some states it's illegal to start counting those until election day, which means those aren't going to be reported until early the next morning at the soonest. But it also matters what locality these are coming from, right? So if all of one side's voters are in specific places, and let's just use Virginia as an example, we know that most Republican votes are in the western part of the state, in the rural parts of the state, and in certain counties like Hanover, right? And most of the Democratic Party votes are in urban areas: Richmond, Arlington, Northern Virginia, Alexandria, maybe Fairfax County. I think Arlington is something like 85% Democratic Party votes typically. So if it looks like Winsome Sears is winning at 10 o'clock, right? And you're getting all excited because you're a Republican, you want her to win. It's a surprise because she's been behind the polls the whole time. Make sure you take note of which counties and which precincts have already reported, because and the same goes the other way. If you're a Democrat and you see that Spanberger's way ahead, but that you haven't seen any results from west of Charlottesville yet, be careful, because that's where Winsome Sears' votes are going to come from. So this doesn't indicate any kind of fishy manipulation of votes. It's a matter of the reporting and how long it takes. Some of the smaller counties or precincts might report very quickly up the chain because they only have 26 votes to count.
Right.
Whereas a larger jurisdiction like Fairfax County, or even a single precinct in the city of Alexandria, might take longer because they've got 26,000 votes to report. Does all that make sense, or am I talking out of school?
No, that all makes sense, but it's really important to understand that there's not much rhyme nor reason for the sequence that results are reported in. You can't look at you can't attribute reasons to why Charlottesville was reported at 10 o'clock rather than 8 o'clock. because there's a whole lot of reasons. But probably the most important thing that everyone should understand, and sometimes the political pundits and the media in particular need to be reminded that all the election night results are unofficial.
Hmm. No,
So
that's a key point.
they're all unofficial. They're all subject to change because in the 5 days, 7 days following the election, uh, there's a process called canvassing, different kind of canvassing than on a campaign. But another way of thinking about it or looking at it is post-election audits. Those
Okay.
results are audited and compared and double checked to make sure that nobody transposed numbers when they were typing in the numbers, that all the ballots that were supposed to be counted were actually counted, that ballots weren't counted twice, um, and that late arriving absentees that are still qualified to be counted are eligible, that those get included. And there are some ballots that the machine just can't read, but they're still valid ballots. And sometimes those need to be counted by hand and reported out separately. So the election night results are always unofficial and they will always change before they are certified. And there's this very uh, detailed bipartisan process that every locality goes through before the results are certified to make sure that they are accurate and complete. So people need to remember that. Election night, nobody's elected on election night. Okay. It looks like some people are projected to win on election night, but nobody actually wins on election night. Nobody wins until the results have been audited and certified and then recombined. And the other issue that often comes up,
Right.
sometimes people think that the losing candidate needs to concede. Uh, and if a candidate concedes, then they're done. They've lost. But a concession has no legal force or effect. Uh, and if
Right.
someone can concede, and when the vote totals are actually certified, and they can win, uh, and the fact that they conceded doesn't negate them winning. So yeah, we may have had a little bit of fuzz in the middle here, Stan. So is there anything to clarify?
No, I just want, I guess, the short version of what you're saying there is that if it looks like I lost on election night and I concede, all I'm really doing is conceding that it looks like I've lost.
Right.
But especially if it's very close, and very close elections can trigger automatic recounts or allow the loser or one of the candidates to request a recount, which means basically going through all those ballots again. But that canvassing process, does that include sort of? I guess it would include some sort of uh, physical check of a certain number of the ballots, right? To
In
to
some states, yes. In Virginia, no. That's not part of the pre-certification audits that go on.
Okay.
In other places, yeah. Like in California, I needed to do a 1% hand count, a hand count of 1% of the precincts uh,
Okay.
to compare against the machine counts to validate that the counts were
Oh, okay.
accurate. Now in Virginia, there's a corollary process called a risk limiting audit, but that happens
Hmm.
after the election's been certified.
Okay.
And it's just a random sample within a random sample. Uh,
Okay.
so it's not it's not actually a hand count.
Got it. So I guess the point to drive home here is that um, election officials, like Scott used to be, and the incumbents today, they work very hard to make sure that these things are the votes are accurately counted, that there's no fraud, there's no cheating. Clearly, you're going to see a little bit of that. I mean, there's always every election is going to have one or two people show up someone's going to show up with my ID who looks like me and vote in my place. That's going to happen from time to time. There's no evidence of any kind that this kind of fraud is widespread. I remember some years ago there were reports that someone had basically filled a bus with people and paid them to go around and vote in like 7 different polling places or 10 different polling places across the day. That turned out to be a false report. It's
Yeah, it's
very
not
difficult to
physically
do.
possible.
Yeah,
It's not possible for that to
right.
happen because every voter is individually verified.
Right. So these kinds of reports are spurious, and you should make sure if there is something like that going on, it's fairly easily detectable through all these processes and safeguards, and then the police will come knock on your door because it's a felony to do that. Right? It's against the law. So, but
Right. And I would just say to that, Stan, that people are always going to try, somebody is always going to try to game the system. Just like somebody's always going to break the speed limit, somebody's always going to
right.
run a red light.
Yeah.
But there are processes in place to prevent that from happening, to prevent somebody from actually fraudulently voting.
Right.
And that's what happens most of the time when somebody games this. It's caught up front. The voter's prevented from doing whatever it is that they're trying to do. Very rarely does it actually make it into the ballot bin, into the ballot box, where somebody succeeds at doing something. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. It's just human nature that somebody's going to try to game the system, but the rules prevent it and catch it, and very, very seldom is anyone successful at pulling anything off.
I think there was last 4 years ago there was a relative of one of the candidates tried to vote in 2 different precincts, and that was caught up front, right? That was
Right.
captured up
It
front.
was a little bit more than that. Since you brought it up, when I was the General Registrar in Fairfax County, uh, the poll workers reported to me that the youngest son of Governor Youngkin, who was 17 and not eligible to vote, had repeatedly tried to vote at a number of different
Oh, okay.
precincts on election day.
More to it than I thought.
Yeah, so he wasn't eligible, and he tried to do it multiple times, and he tried to intimidate the poll workers to allow him to vote. But the process worked. The
Right.
poll workers did what they were supposed to do. They caught it, they stopped it, and it looked really bad. But and had he succeeded, it would have been fraud. But he didn't succeed
Right.
because the people did what they were supposed to do.
Right. So the safeguards in place work, and at the end of the day, in some ways, that's just a kid trying to help dad, right?
Right.
So, nothing real, no real so evil genius going on there. Just a kid trying to help his dad out.
Yes.
But
So the personality type, or the typology of the most common fraudster in elections is mom.
oh, is that right?
Yes. The kid's off
That's
to
interesting.
school, or husband's on a business trip, and they have the vote by mail ballot there. Oh, this is vote by mail fraud is what I'm talking about.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
it's mom. And I've caught moms doing it,
Yeah.
and use the signatures to prosecute the case. But moms, and it's not malicious; they're just trying to be helpful.
Right.
And most attempts at fraud, from my experience, are not the malicious type, but it's mom. And the second largest group is a senior citizen who forgot that they already voted their vote by
Mm,
mail ballot and shows up to vote again in person because somebody
right.
said, hey, it's election day, let's go vote.
Right.
So those are the 2 most common scenarios, and both of them are fairly innocent, and the rules and procedures catch them most of the time.
Right. Now that's interesting. That's a little interesting sort of side note there from your experience that it's basically mom thinking, hey, the hubby forgot to vote. Let me send it in for him. Right.
So Junior's off at
Good.
school, and he when he came home last week, he forgot to vote his ballot. So I'm going to do it for him.
Yeah, I'm a male because he's off at William and Mary. He's not here, so I'll draw.
Yeah.
I'll
So
fill it out for him. Right.
right.
So, that's funny. And that's I guess we're at 40 minutes, so I guess we can start wrapping this up a little bit. But at the end of the day, all these election officials, voters, they're just people. People make mistakes. There are some malicious folks out there that are trying to game the system, but if you really think about it, at the end of the day, the scale you'd have to go to actually change the results of an election are pretty big. In a state like Virginia, where how many, any idea of roughly how many votes we could expect?
Oh,
Just
we have over 1 million early votes cast already.
okay,
Um, so I'm guessing we may have around 5 million, 6 million when all said and done.
okay, okay. So at that scale, I mean, you'd have to assume that you need to change something like 150,000 votes, if not more, to actually make an impact on the statewide level, at least. Probably more than that. So real quick, but let's go ahead and wrap it up. But let's play pundit here for a minute. How do you think this is going to come out? You think Spanberger will win?
I think Spanberger is going to win handily. And the question is it going to be by 5 points, 7 points, or 15 points? And I can see scenarios where it would be any of those three. Uh, there's a weird vibe going on this election. This is a state election. It's not a federal election. Uh, but the federal issues and the federal uh, things that are going on at the federal level have really bled over into the
Yep.
voters' way of looking at this election and the issues that they're looking at and how they view the candidates. So it's really kind of a wild card, but I think that Spanberger is safely going to be the next governor of Virginia.
Yeah, I think Hashmi probably wins the lieutenant governor race. The AG race is a little bit closer to being a toss up because of the text thing. But I think that what we saw in 2017 after Trump won in 2016 the first time was we saw a lot of red districts in the House of Delegates flip to blue that year that were sort of unexpected. And that was because of the backlash. And, Virginia historically has been, the pattern here has been that whichever party wins the presidency in the year before a Virginia governor election loses the Virginia governor's seat. And that's, I think the only outlier there where that didn't happen was when Northam won,
Right.
right? Right.
Right.
So
So I think the table is set, the stage is set because of the presidential election results, and also just uh, Trump 2.0. I think the table is set again for a number of solidly red districts to be flipped blue. And I think that because Spanberger has been such a strong candidate, I think she's going to pull a lot of those close contested races over the line and make them blue, and that the General Assembly will go from a single vote majority to not quite a super majority, but maybe getting close.
I would anticipate. I took a look at some of the numbers, and a couple of these are not terribly surprising. I wouldn't be surprised if May Navarre beats David Owen. I would not be surprised if Jessica Anderson beats Amanda Batten. She's outraised her fundraising. She's raised more money. Um, the open seat in the 89th, I think the Democrats take that one. That was a red seat. He retired after one term, I think. And then I think Kim Adams has a good chance to beat Kim Taylor. The surprising one is the one out west. It's a red district. Chris Obenshane is the delegate there. This district is basically south and west of Roanoke. I mean, it does not include a lot of the Roanoke precincts, which are pretty blue. But if Lily Franklin can flip that one, then you might be looking at a 57 or 58 to 42 or 43 Democrat advantage. And then the next question, and we can maybe talk about this next week or sometime soon, because we're already at the time we normally like to wrap up. But one thing I've seen is that there are apparently a few uh, red red delegates, Republican delegates who seem to be considering retiring and resigning from the seat because they don't want to be in a 40 seat, 40 seat minority in the House
Right.
delegates, and that would set up some special elections that could be interesting. And if the things change, for example, I think your chances of winning, all the guys that parse this data put it at something like 3 or 4%, which is
It's
better than
more
the
than
chance I
zero.
had.
It's more than zero.
It's more than zero, and it's been going up, right? So uh, that would be, if that happens, folks. That means the blue wave is a tsunami, and folks are really really annoyed with Donald Trump. But it will be interesting to see what happens with Buddy Fowler after next week when we start seating people. He's been in a long time. He's taken a lot of criticism for not living in the district, and both of us believe he doesn't. So I would be curious to see if he might be one of the ones that would pull out on the assumption that okay, I don't have to pretend anymore, and a Republican's probably going to win the seat anyway, right?
Right.
Although special elections can go crazy.
Yeah,
All
things
right, well,
you never know. Yeah,
you never
I
know.
heard that same heard that same retirement rumor. A number of Republicans don't want to serve, continue serving in a minority capacity, but it's just a rumor.
Yeah.
I think we need to wait to see how that plays out. Uh, the voters may retire them anyway. So, uh,
There's that. There is that. So, well, great conversation, Scott. Really appreciate you bringing your election expertise to the table to let folks know how this stuff works. I think it's important for us to see behind the scenes on these things, understand how difficult the process is, how much logistics matters, that it takes a lot of work by a lot of dedicated people who are doing the best they can to give us free and fair elections, including a lot of volunteers, people who basically volunteer and they get paid, but it's a pittance to sit there at the polls for basically what amounts to 14 hours or so,
right.
and check your name, check your ID, check to make sure your ballot went through correctly, and that kind of thing. So when you go to vote on Tuesday, thank those folks because they deserve some praise too, right? Any
Yeah.
final
So
thoughts?
yeah, there's one thing
Go.
I really want voters to understand that by the time the votes are certified and finalized, um, any mistakes that may have happened have been identified. Any corrections that needed to be made are made. Any fraud that may have happened should have been detected. So when those results are certified, voters should abide by the final certified outcomes. Regardless how disappointed you are, if your candidates lose, you should have confidence that the process works, the process is solid. The process has served our nation for more than 2 centuries and has only recently uh, come under attack. But voters
Right.
need to have confidence in the final outcomes because a lot of people of both parties are involved in producing those results.
Right. And then if your candidate does lose, then it's time to get to work and try to convince the folks that voted for the other guy or girl that they were wrong, and try again next time. Right. It's
Right.
in Virginia. It's only 2 years later, so you'll get another crack at that apple. All right, Scott. Thanks for a great conversation. Really appreciate your expertise. I know your campaign is going well. I've seen you all over the internet with your static ads and with your videos from the wood shop on Facebook and other platforms. Folks, you can find Scott at www.scottka4va.com. That's Scott K, the number 4va.com. If you want to make a last minute donation, that would help get one more set of digital ads up as we get to the weekend, a very critical weekend, because 1 million people have voted, but 4 or 5 million have not. So we got to get those guys that last minute information. You can find us together at www.foggybottomline.com. We're on YouTube at Foggy Bottom Line Media and on the other social media platforms at Foggy Bottom Line. So reach out, let us know what you think, comment, share, subscribe. And if you would like to support the podcast right now, you can do that with Venmo. And I'm working on some other ways. You could buy us both a cup of coffee or a beer or a burger at Five Guys or something like that.
Or just encourage us to keep going.
Just encourage us to keep going. Yeah, just let us know if this is valuable. I've gotten some good feedback. I've gotten some bad feedback, especially on TikTok. I'll talk about that at some point, which surprised me, honestly. But I thought that would be mostly young folks. But and who knows how many of those are bots. But in any event, this is Stan Scott and Scott Konopasek with Foggy Bottom Line Media. We hope that you guys find this valuable. Let us know, and we will be back next week with another podcast. Keep an eye out for spot reports and some other stuff coming online, and we'll see you next time. Scott?
Always a pleasure, Stan.
Always a pleasure, sir. Take care of yourself. Talk
Carry
soon.
on.
Take care, everyone. Have a good day.